everyone. So we're going to move on to the Horace Mann Alumni Award presentation. And I'd like to introduce Susan Opatow, class of 65 graduate. She's a social psychologist and professor on two SUNY universities of New York campuses, John Jay College of Criminal Justice and the Graduate Center. Her scholarship on psychology of conflict and justice focused on exclusionary and inclusionary change over time. And she also served on the Antioch College's alumni board from 2006 to 2012. And without further ado, I'd like to introduce Susan Opatow.
Hi. Okay. Hi. Oh, I'm so thrilled to be here today with you all. It's very exciting to be here to introduce Terry. And first, I am instructed to read the Horace Mann description. The Horace Mann Award for Victory for Humanity recognizes a contribution by alumni of Antioch College who have won some victory for humanity following Horace Mann's advice to the graduating class of 1859. Nominees should be persons or groups of persons whose personal or professional activities have had a profound effect on the present or future human condition. Mann was the first president of Antioch College. So it's really thrilling to introduce Terry, whose work has indeed made a profound effect on the present or future human condition, and I think it will be both. I want to say that Terry and I first met in 2006 when we were both elected to the Antioch College Alumni Board, and we served together on it for 6 years and worked closely together the whole time. On arrival, we each witnessed an amazing, caring, creative, and politically astute community of students and faculty. But in 2007, this devolved into a shocking shutdown of the college by the university, which in turn prompted protest and mobilization, of course, and resulted in an extraordinarily inventive and inclusive initiative, Nonstop Institute, to preserve the college's ethos, pedagogy, and culture. The acquisition of the college by alums was hailed as a victory until its plans for reopening without its faculty, in violation of AAUP, the American Association of University Professors, policies, hollowed out an esteemed institution. Though the faculty sought to work with the Antioch College Continuation Corporation, the alumni who bought the college, the process that unfolded lacked candor and seemingly respect, and irrevocably altered a college that had changed lives. A college that Leon Botstein called, quote, one of the historic, great independent colleges in American history, unquote. We're heartened that there's a growing interest in Antioch's history. Some of that history can be found in links that are in the chat, notably the American Association of University Professors 2009 report, Professor Jean Gregoric's 2010 paper, which is wonderful, and Brian Springer's video, Antioch Confidential. There's also a wealth of information in Antiochiana, an archive treasured by Antiochians and by scholars worldwide. It holds materials from the 3 organizations active from 2008 to 2011, Nonstop, the Antioch College Continuation Corporation, and the Revival Fund, as well as from individuals, and maybe some of you who are in the audience right now. Terry and I dedicate the session to the gifted faculty who contributed to the vitality of Antioch for generations of students. And we applaud a growing recognition of the stark injustices of their ejection from an institution to which they gave so much. We are confident that lifting up and honoring this history will strengthen the college in years to come. So in that spirit, we want to acknowledge that this place, this campus, this land was theirs too. So with that introduction, I want to talk about a time when I met Terry 2 years after our term ended. I went to Detroit to do research, and Terry invited me to attend Martin Luther King Celebration Day at the Orchestra Hall in Detroit. It was quite an amazing event. The program was awesome, and especially awesome was the standing ovation received by 3 students who read and performed their work. It was just an amazing, and I wish we had videos of that moment. Then a year later, Terry published a book with Pete Marcus, who you'll be meeting, and the book To Light a Fire was extraordinary. And here's my blurb for it, which Terry had invited me to write because of my the way I adored Inside Out. The blurb says this luminous book speaks to the transformative power of poetry. It's brilliant, brave writing is poignant, generous, and deeply observant. Essays by talented inside-out teachers with poems from their students speak to readers interested in urban youth, learning communities, teaching, justice, and Detroit's immense vitality. And in this, to me, it just carries forward her work that she started in Antioch as a student, perhaps. And I'll ask her to talk about that now. So Terry, you left Antioch in 1968 with a BA in literature after 18 months AEA in Europe, learning both Swedish and Italian. And you've written that your summer co-op as a teen counselor at Central State University heightened your awareness of Black history and the need for social justice.
Hello.
Can you tell us more about that?
I think so. I'm not seeing my face here.
I see you.
You do. Okay. I guess I'm here then. Yeah, thank you for that introduction. And I think we need to keep our past history present in mind. And we're going through reckonings all over the country these days. So, I think a reckoning is a healthy thing. And I appreciate that, Susan. I'm a passionate supporter of Nonstop. So yeah, I left Antioch in 1968, and I had a degree in literature. I didn't really have a path that I was following, but looking back on my Antioch years, and the things you mentioned were kind of key in my development. Going to Europe for 18 months and being involved in learning 2 different languages pretty well at the time. And then I also translated a book while I was there. I translated Jan Myrdal's Contemporary Confessions of a European Intellectual. And I just wrote it out in a little journal, and I never did anything with it. And the manuscript drowned in my basement in a flood in Detroit some years later. But the book finally came out, Confessions of a Disloyal European. But it was kind of a major book. And then the other thing was the Central State activity. I was a tutor counselor for at-risk youth, one of the early Great Society programs. And Carrie Schulman and Mark Schulman and I were 3 Antiochians that we drove out to Central State every day during the summer, and we worked with kids and we published them. Mark had been editor of the Record. So we went to the Yellow Springs News and put out 2 or 3 issues of something called Da Capo, and you got to see them setting the type by hand, which my grandfather had done at one point, so that kind of resonated. And then we also, most importantly, put on a play, In White America, which had been on Broadway. And Martin Duberman was the playwright, and he had assembled actual documentary materials from African-American history through the centuries, from 1619 on. So there were accounts from the slave ships. We had Sojourner Truth, Frederick Law Olmsted. And then what struck me most, and has stayed with me ever since, were the narratives of formerly enslaved people that the WPA Works Project had collected. So we put on this play with these kids out at Central State at their auditorium. We got slides from the Antioch Library. historical slides. So it was kind of a big deal. And I really did not have any kind of inkling of Black history at that stage in my life, and had never, you know, I mean, I grew up in the Jim Crow South and I had some real awareness of things, but the whole historical depth was just lacking. So that was a start. And then the other thing was that for my senior project as a literature major, I created a manuscript of experimental poetry that I titled, and I center justified it, Ex Per I Fragmental. And, and I had been reading a lot of Gertrude Stein, what can I say? So then I went on to Detroit, and I started working in the schools. I got certified to teach. I married. I had a wonderful son. And so I was working in the city, teaching in the middle schools, and also just becoming aware of Black history and reading a lot of Black poets. I read Gwendolyn Brooks. I read Dudley Randall, who was a great Detroit poet. And bringing that into my life at that time was really very important. I took a class at Wayne State University with this wonderful Black professor, Jacqueline Tillis. So I did some studies of and learning more about Black poetry, Black culture. So that was kind of, you know, went on for a few years. And then in 1987, I transferred from teaching middle school to high school. I transferred to Mumford High School, which was a large comprehensive high school in the city. It had lots of programming. We had journalism, creative writing, radio speech, 2 art classes, lots of music, drama programs. And at the end of my first year there, my department chair said, well, we had a meeting. She said, we're going to have a publication of student poems, and who has poems that they would like to share. And I looked around the room and some people raised their hands. So I thought, well, you know, I can do that. And I went home that night and I wrote the first poem I had written in 20 years. And it was really a kind of a staggering kind of experience to have reached that level. I mean, just changed my life basically, because once I started writing poetry, then I wanted to know more about it. And the next year, Elaine, our department head, asked me to teach creative writing. So during those it was a period of very rich teaching creative writing and bringing creative writers into my classroom. So I would write grants and bring in all these fabulous people, and they would inspire the kids and they would inspire me. And the other thing we did, I'm still not seeing myself on screen, but we published the students' work. So this was one of our first publication style, and it was, you know, professionally printed and featured student art and writing, and they all signed the books to me as like a little memento. So that was an important part of the creative writing teaching I was doing in the public schools at the time. And so after, I don't know, 1992, 93, I had the opportunity to apply for a National Endowment for the Humanities Scholarship Award, which gave me a year off, a sabbatical. And I spent the year studying Emily Dickinson. And when I came back from that year, I transferred to a different high school, CMA High School. And I tried to start the same creative ferment with my students. And a benefactor who had supported the program at Mumford, a Mumford alumnus, had been giving us some money there. So I asked him if he would support a similar project at a different Detroit high school. So this is what we put together. He gave me a little bit of money. Can you see this? I still can't see myself. So this was Passages. And again, put writing and art together as much as possible. And so I sent, Bob Shea was his name, is his name. I sent him a copy of this in summer of 94. And I got back a letter asking me if I would like to write a proposal to his foundation to expand the work that I was doing citywide. So I did. And he gave me a very generous donation, and that's how Inside Out got started. And basically carrying what I had been doing in my classroom forward was the core of what we proposed. We started with 5 high schools, the one I was teaching in, and 4 others where the teachers, like myself, were excited about writing and about teaching writing. That was Mumford, CMA, Ford, Davis Aerospace, and Cass Tech. And it was a pilot program, but that's when I first met Peter Marcus. Peter came into our program then as one of our first ever writers in residence. And the core of that program was pretty much kind of what I had been doing in my classroom, which was having writers in residence and then also publishing the students' work. And a book came out of every program. And also the other aspect of that was to celebrate the students. And so if we could have the picture of the students in front of the mic. So I have this picture of these students in our very first ever, there we go. Yeah, our very first ever gala celebration. And these were my my students from CMA High School. And Michael in the blue at the mic, his mother took that picture and she was on our founding board of Inside Out. And she was a really active, wonderful parent to work with. Nandi on the far right is carrying a copy of Soliloquy, which was the first publication we did at CMA High School. Nandi was in the 9th grade then. She now has a publication. She's published a really fabulous book of poetry with Northwestern University Press that has won 2 major prizes. She went on after working, after graduation to U of M, and she got a double master's at Indiana University, and she worked a lot with Inside Out. That's one of the nice things about Inside Out is that our students have always wanted to continue being part of the program, and she, for a number of years, ran our Citywide Poets program and a lot of other things. Next to her is Martinique, and what I remember most about Martinique is that when we were starting Inside Out, our board put together a list of names. We were trying to figure out what to call ourselves. And the students voted in the 5 pilot schools. They voted on the name. And Martinique, I'll never forget her saying, that means we're taking what's inside of us out into the world. So that's Martinique. And here's Ellery, who was just a lovely student too. I don't really know more about where she is, but that was how we got started. And so the core of the programming was always an exciting, inspiring writer coming into work in the classroom with the students and publishing a book, and also sharing their work in the community at large. And I'd really like to invite, I'm really happy that Peter Marcus can be with us now. And I'd like to have Pete come on and talk a little bit about being an Inside Out writer from the very beginning of time. So do we have Pete on the?
Yeah, I'm here, Terry.
Hey Pete, how you doing?
Very well. Congratulations. It's no surprise to anyone that you're getting this award, and especially in light of victory for humanity, which I think this work clearly speaks to your impact. And I think one thing I just want to sort of celebrate is the epiphany that I think is really central to the work that Terry has kind of inaugurated with Inside Out and its lasting impact. And that epiphany comes through seeing herself as a writer, again, she studied at Antioch, and then she went on to have a career as a middle school teacher, raising her son and having a family, and just being I imagine just like many teachers being swallowed by the act of teaching, but then it was the act of writing. And again, sort of whenever the department heads sort of said, hey, who's got a poem that they contribute? And other people raising their hand, and Terry sort of saying, well, geez, I guess I should do it too. And that attitude, I think, is really elemental to the work that we do. And then the idea too, when that sort of caught fire in Terry, and then she started fostering the pre-beginnings of Inside Out. And then when Robert Shea comes along and says, hey, could you do this citywide or at 5 schools? And that attitude of sure thing, I can do it, you know. And then I've got it just scribbled down in my notes. I did. We did it. And I think that that attitude has just really been a part of Inside Out since the beginnings, and the fact that Terry was able to carry that forward for over 2 decades, and the fact that after sort of passing the torch to our current leadership, you know, that's sort of still the attitude at work, is that, you know, sure thing, we can do that. Or, you know, it's just this belief that I think comes from the empowerment that poetry just sort of instills in anyone who picks up a pencil and picks up that attitude of sure thing, I can do that, I can write a poem. And I think that comes straight from the heart of Terry. So like she said, I've been around since that very 5 school moment. And I remember that first year going into Henry Ford High School. And I love the fact that a teacher there sort of gave a young writer that I was that opportunity. And then it worked. And then sort of like, hey, there's this other school. And then I think I went to Cass Tech with Deborah Thompson, and that worked too. Like, we did it. And then next thing I know, I'm at a high school where the kids are learning how to work on airplane engines. And what does poetry have to do with aerospace? Well, poetry has to do with all spaces. And I think that belief has really driven the work that we've been doing now for whatever year it is now. And doing the math, I think it's over 25, 26 years.
Wow. Thank you so much, Pete. I mean, I think that's kind of the Antioch way. You know, Susan and I have been talking about where does it all come from? And one of the things as Antioch students we were able to do was have own plans. And you could go to your dean or your advisor and say, you know, I want to try this. And when I went AEA, Antioch Education Abroad, you know, I thought, well, gee, I'd like to go to Italy and I'd like to go to Sweden, and they figured out how to send me. I mean, a lot of colleges just have like a set campus, maybe in the south of France or something, but they sent us everywhere. You know, Trexie Nestor went to Tanzania, or folks went to Yugoslavia. I mean, it was a lot of initiative. So I think that kind of carried forward. And,
I love that the mission of Inside Out is to think broadly, create bravely, and share their voices with the world. I mean, it speaks to a spirit that is Antioch, but also transcends Antioch. And it's a very beautiful spirit in the world, especially in these times.
yeah, thank you, Susan. Yeah, when I first started, I had this sort of little thought in the back of my mind to give the law the prevailing stereotypes about urban youth. And it was so important to me that the verve and style and wit of our students should be something that the world could appreciate.
Totally.
I think that, and we see that in the Martin Luther King Day celebration every year. Every year, our kids create a poem that's topical the George Floyd poem, or it was all related to issues of freedom and justice. And every year they knock it out of the park. So that's been very nice. Yeah. So
So
yeah, go ahead.
should I say,
Go ahead.
in 2009, Michelle Obama honored Inside Out in a White House ceremony with a Youth Program Award for Citywide Poets and an after-school program that you initiated. U.S. Poet Laureate Natasha Trethewey featured Inside Out on a wonderful PBS NewsHour in 2013. I've watched that a number of times. So can you tell us about Citywide Poets? In what other ways has Inside Out success been appreciated?
Well, yeah, Citywide Poets, I founded it. I got the idea actually from a program in Chicago. Because I was been pretty active in the National Council of Teachers of English, and I went to their conference in Chicago in the early days of Inside Out, and there was a group of students there from a group called Young Chicago Authors, and they are an after-school writing program, and so they were, I thought, well, yeah, we should have an after-school component. So, and that's what the White House Award is for not for programming that goes on within schools, but programs outside of school. And we applied for this. We got it on the third try, which I was so bad. And it was just a total peak moment for me when, and I'll probably choke up when I say this, but when she quoted Peter Marcus, when she gave the awards, she said, according to a writer from Inside Out, she didn't have Pete's name, but it was that if you ask a child to dream, he will dream. And that came from our application. So yeah, and that's Lena Citron in the middle. And that night, we were one of a couple of there are 15 organizations every year for this award, and we were one of a couple that were invited to perform at the White House. And Lena was that student. And in fact, you mentioned To Light a Fire. So I don't know if you all can see this, but this is the book that Peter and I co-edited, and we have essays by 20 incredible writers who've worked through Inside Out, and they've gone on to be NEA awards and National Book Critics Circle awards, and they really are masters of in the field of writing, and it's just been wonderful to have them as part of the back story of all this. But yeah, this was the book that we put together, and Lena's poem is in here. So
and on that book, I just want to say the way that it captures something that's really beautiful, the conversation that goes on between teachers and students, and how both are teachers and both are learners. It's an ethos that is so important in creative work, and in also forming relationships across generations. And I think that that's just an amazing contribution. It's a gorgeously written book, and that there's a kind of call and response there that I really can't say enough good things about it.
Thank you. Well, we didn't give the writers any parameters. They just, write what comes to your heart about it, and that really shows. So, and they were just wonderful people, and still are. So I feel, very grateful for that. And so, Citywide Poets is our after-school program. And before I call up Chante, who is waiting to talk, we have a beautiful video. So if Mary could show the video, it's about a 2.5-minute video of the program. And in this video, you're going to see the backdrop is the office. And the office has I don't know how many yards feet of books, but these are books that we have published over the years. And we have, every school where we have a program that has its own publication. And sometimes people will come up to that office and say, oh, I think I was in there. And you'll pull the book off the shelf and there's your poem. I mean, that's happened more than once. So the books are treasures, and I think it's the principals, everybody, we think it's really important to honor the students' work with this publication. And we do it more than any other similar program around the country. I think we are kind of the most, I don't know, fiercely committed to publication of the students' work. So let's enjoy this video. Let's try it. It's muted, I think.
Yeah, it's muted.
Hey Mary, we can't hear the audio, so it will want to start and stop over again. Maybe stop sharing. Be sure those two boxes are checked at the bottom.
I'd encourage everybody to go to the Inside Out website, and there's just a wealth of wonderful material on there. And that's one of the things that I have appreciated much since my retirement in 2015. Is, you know, how many good things have continued to develop out of Inside Out, and we always yearn for a great website, and we've got one.
Inside Out's mission is to inspire students to think broadly, create bravely, and share their voices with the wider world. To expose students to poetry and to encourage them to be brave in how they share, be brave in how they write, and be broad in how they think.
Inside Out's mission is really to demystify poetry.
I like Inside Out because we get to write a lot of poems and do a lot of fun things.
Inside Out is awesome. They give the kids an opportunity to create and be creative.
Children tend to think that books are written by people other than themselves. So if you make a student feel comfortable with their own words, they're going to want to read the words of their peers.
Inside Out's creative writing residencies happen in schools throughout Metro Detroit. When I think about art and art in schools, I think about preparing students to participate in a larger community. And having art be that introduction and be that way of understanding the world is a really amazing way to introduce them to where they're going to go or where it's possible for them to go.
When I write long poems, it calms me, and when I write long poems, I feel like I'm doing a good job.
It was quite an amazing workshop.
Every residency that we do within a school ends with a publication of the book, like this one here.
Marvelous, oh marvelous moon, how do you float, oh marvelous moon? You shine like a nightlight, oh marvelous moon. I'll land on you, shining at night like a floating gray moon. Once I'll land on you, bumpy and round, an old big marvelous moon. Tastes like cheese, oh marvelous moon. I love you.
You're a really good poet, so I can't wait to read your stuff in the future. Maybe I'll take your poetry class. We can switch roles.
Yes.
I think having a poem in a book really builds confidence in students, really makes that experience that happens in the classroom a lasting one. So we try to build their confidence, build their bravery in being able to share with one another, and build the way that they learn to express themselves through different forms of poetry.
Okay, so now that you've met Chante, maybe we can hear from her directly.
Hi, everybody.
Hey, Chante. Tell us.
My name is Chante Brown. I am the schools coordinator with Inside Out Literary Arts, but before that, I was a student with Inside Out Literary Arts. I started with them back in 2001 because my counselor and my best friend were pushing me to join this after-school program, and a poet had come into my room, Kevin Rashid, who now continues to serve on the board, was the poet who came into that Cast Tech classroom at the time. And I was already interested in writing, but to have somebody really spend time with my work and show interest in my work, and be a writer themselves was transformative in building my own confidence, and making me realize how shy I was not and how much I actually wanted to use my voice in the world. That's what I've seen time and time again. So I'm so honored to speak on behalf of Dr. Blackhawk. Thank you so much for your work. This is well deserved. And one of the things that strikes me is when I think about that video and I ask Aubrielle Daniel, who was that wonderful young poet, that was Aubrielle in second grade. I got to know Aubrielle through third and fourth grade, and that student just continued to blossom and write, and actually created a cohort, her and two other students who just loved poetry. We're in a Zoom class all together, trying to one up each other on their metaphors and their similes, but also just having a great time with poems, to be in fourth grade and be playing with words rather than just completing assignments. I'm excited for the humans that that creates in the world. I know as Peter Marcus and I talk to schools that there's always a principal or a teacher who will say, you know, I remember Inside Out, I was a part of it. And that's how the legacy has really grown, is that they will pull out that book and show that poem that is inside and find it on their page, talk about how it was in their classroom, and now they're deciding to bring it into their school building because of how they've seen its effect on students. I want to talk about how it comes outside of the classroom, because for me, Inside Out wasn't just about the work that we got to do in school and after school, but it was really that out of school space, being able to convene and build community with writers was fantastic. And not just writers who were good at poetry, but writers who understood the community, writers who were asking questions to better understand and dig into things, writers who were part of the streets that I was walking on and the stores that I was shopping at and the universities I'd eventually be applying to. Building that bridge between young people who just have these wonderful ideas and this wild imagination, and then the real literary world, in the real world of people who are citizens in that city, I think is something that can't be taken for granted. When I think about you, Dr. Blackhawk, talking about being a white person learning about the Black community, what I love was that when you put these poets in these classrooms and into these spaces, they were all different kinds of people. There were Black poets, Latinx poets, white poets, and all of them were writing about the city from such a passionate point of view and writing about their experiences. And it built this confidence that people care about my culture, people care about where I come from, people are writing about it, they're talking about it, and they want to be in conversation with me, even if I don't know who I quite am yet, even if I'm not at the point where I understand where my voice is yet. And now those people are throughout the city. Now those people are principals at schools and bankers and financial consultants and politicians. And it all starts sometimes with a poem. What I love is when we talk about Inside Out and we're talking about it with teachers and with students, is that it's not just about creating poets. It's really not always about creating poets at all. It's about the voice. It's about the bravery. It's about the broad thinking, and it's about that sharing aspect. And that's what Inside Out has always continued to do, is be a place where people learn how to share in these creative ways and use their voice to make connections and build community. And I'm excited that the work is continuing, and I'm so excited to celebrate you.
You are a wonder. Thank you so much, Chante. So beautiful. I just know how thrilled I was when I visited, was it Pulaski School? Where you were the writer in residence at that point, and to see you facilitating the gala and, you know, just so graciously, beautifully working with the students, the principal, the teachers. It was a real kind of a dream come true. So I'm so glad you're with us. I'm totally glad. And I'm glad how you talk about the connection with the city, because I know there's something very special with Detroit about Inside Out. You know, that's why I have it website, insideoutdetroit.org, because we're grounded there so much. So yeah, that was so beautiful. Thank you so much. I think it's important that we are writers, as Pete said, you know, that everyone in the staff primarily are really serious about being writers. I think that that makes a big, that keeps it grounded. And yeah, so I'm just kind of blown away. Thank you again for that. And the video was wonderful. I wanted to, we were going to do a conversation right now. And then I'm going to end with some poems. Susan, what do you have any?
Whatever you want. Do you want to have a conversation or just go right into poems?
Let's, how much time do we have?
I have 2:37. So
well,
we have.
I think we've pretty much had, we've really talked around some beautiful things. One thing I would like to point out, in the recent stuff I've been seeing since I retired, that in one of the videos, Chante, the program was described as in the classrooms, after school, and in the community. It's like there's 3 legs to the stool now. And we were always doing community collaborations of all kinds. And there are some wonderful memories of our work with the Detroit Opera House or the Detroit Institute of Arts or MOCAD, the museums. I mean, we were always kind of like, we could do it like Pete said, you know, we could put something together with this group of people or that group of people. And I'm just so happy to see that continuing. I know we now have a project at the Detroit Zoo and, you know, many, many ways of being embedded and grounded in the community. And so it's very, very rewarding to see that. And the other thing I noticed I wanted to ask about is that you talk about trauma-informed pedagogy. Could you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah,
Me?
absolutely.
No, no, I thought that's good. You do that, sure.
No, Chante, please.
That's great.
So trauma-informed pedagogy is about recognizing when students are in distress and responding to that, either by de-escalating or providing some things for them that can help them cope and come back to a place of peace. And when you're asking people to write, inevitably you are bringing something that is within them out, and that can be very powerful, and it can also be very dangerous. And so trauma-informed pedagogy is about just equipping our writers and our teaching artists and also our students with the tools to be able to write as a way to cope and be able to bring themselves back to a place where they can function beautifully and healthily. I love that it's involved in our writing practice, and it's something that that finally the entire state and country is getting on board with, that social emotional growth and learning is pivotal to being able to function healthily in this world. And so we use poems to help students envision joy. Some of the things that you'll find if you get your hand on any of our publications from last year are these poems about finding the light. And students wrote about where they were finding light throughout COVID, that they were finding light in their morning orange juice or in the bowl of cereal or the tree whose branches is fluttering outside or the bird that they can hear in their window or their friend giving that waving sound in the box. And to have those documented, what will that mean for the students who read those in the future and need their own ways to find light? So we're training all of our teaching artists in trauma-informed pedagogy and just how to be responsible poets and teaching artists in this world.
I think that's so beautiful. I wanted to hear more about it.
Beautiful, yeah.
Really fun. So I'll read a couple of poems and then Pete is going to kind of moderate a chat.
But before that, I'm going to introduce a bit about that. 3 decades, I wanted to say about your poetry awards. Then may we hear your poems. 3 decades after leaving Antioch, Terry published her first book of poetry with awards that included the 1990 Foley Prize, the John Ciardi Prize for Escape Artist, published in 2003, the 2010 Pablo Neruda Prize, and a Kresge Arts in Detroit Literary Fellowship. Kirkus Reviews named her fifth book, One Last River, Mayapple Press, a top 2019 poetry title. So Terry, we look forward to hearing some of your poems.
Well, thank you, Susan. Thank you, everybody. It is important as a poet. This is the book, third book, called The Dropped Hand, and the poem that I wrote that was the life-changing poem when back at Mumford. I wrote about my grandmother's death. This book has poems about my mother's death, as well as my dad's stroke, and the circumstances of my saying goodbye to my grandmother and saying goodbye to my mother were almost replicas of each other. So all I had to do in this poem was change grandmother to mother, and it's called Once. Once at a glacier's foot, I found a clam, or so it seemed, turned to stone. I wondered at its journey and kept it all these years. My dresser top is detritus and dust, dried grasses, glass tumbled and ground in oceans. Odd corners turn up odd fragments as I paw, searching a poem lost among them. A bud vase, coyly painted, my mother's, a feather in that one. Her hand held firm in mine the week before she died. So, One Less River. So there are some Detroit poems in One Less River. So I thought I would read a couple of those, and then I will read one that hasn't been published yet. But this is the one that came out from Mayapple Press. And the title poem is dedicated to a wonderful artist named Blair, who worked with our students and was kind of just the most transformative, loving, exciting person you could imagine working with kids. And he died tragically very young. And so this one is for him. One Less River, for Blair, 1967 to 2011. Okay, so you try anything and you were always ready to go to South Africa, Siberia, New York, barely 2 cents in your pocket, a guitar for the subway, a laugh to get you through the night. And you'd ride anything. You disdained cowboys, but when the cowboy says how he can't resist that unexplainable feeling that makes me go get on bulls, it's like everything just stops, the world has stopped spinning at that point in time. It's you I hear, dancing, riding the line. Eternal stoppage, perpetual spin. Last night the moon was a coin, a relief of wings, a scarab beaten gold, rounded or rendered to place on your eyelids forever now. Today a darker fuzz belies the sun. How dreary myth becomes. Forget this channel of regret, gospel coinage, tedious juke joints, tankers heading south. Dear ventriloquist, don't move your lips. Listen to the hermits, antennae clicking, claws barely touching the sand. Perpetual stoppage, eternal spin. Put those shells in your pocket. Make it one less river to cross a second time. I don't know how to turn off that phone. This poem, when I traveled early in the 2000s, this poem comes from 2003, and I told people I was from Detroit. They would say, well, where are you really from? Like, oh, you mean West Bloomfield, you know? And I'm saying, no, I live in Detroit. So Detroit has changed from the viewpoint of the country from then to now somewhat. But anyway, this takes a kind of a pet peeve approach to that. It's called Down in Detroit, and it has as an epigraph, "Help me, I live in Detroit." Sign taped to a tip cup on the popcorn counter. Maple Art Theater, Bloomfield Hills, Michigan, 2003. Remember when the flight attendant had us prepare for landing in Honolulu, oops, Detroit, and the whole plane laughed? And did I tell you the one about the ex-Michigander who turned her back on me and pointedly bestowed her life story, border collies and Harry Potter included, on another woman waiting for the Napa shuttle, after I winced and replied, yes, yes, in Detroit, I live in Detroit? Or the librarian from Rochester Hills, his, you live down in Detroit? Still echoes, down, down, down. Tough enough to love this town without the shocked looks, dropped jaws of fellow citizens who assume whiteness unites as they eye you, reassessing instantly. Still, the D, dear D, must have some magic in it. How else explain the doubled take, the suddenly shed disguise? In less than an eye blink, I've had men switch from flirt to default mode, their mental U-turns screeching with chagrin. Such power in a word to make a person give himself away. Detroit, Detroit, straight in French, place where waters move swiftly. Yes. I borrowed from a default mode from Toni Morrison's book, Playing in the Dark, where she explains how the default mode in American literature always assumes white characters unless otherwise specified. Right? So, and one more, this book's cover art was done by Neil Frankenhauser. And he is no longer with us. I think part of the stresses of the, I don't know, having thrown myself into Inside Out so head over heels put a strain on my marriage, and my marriage ended in 2005. So I was fortunate to meet Neil, who is a wonderful artist, a Toledo artist, and we had some really good times together. And this poem just came out recently in the Connecticut River Review. It's called A Blessing of Scallops, Eastern Market, Detroit. And it has an epigraph from Derek Walcott. Sit, feast on your life. Succulent pillows of salt and sea, flesh dollops scooped from glistening shells, lined across the seafood company's bed of ice. Can they tell me how waves know when to stop cresting? If I walk alone through a midnight graveyard, will my bones remain the same? Maybe Brother Nature, with his purslane, arugula, and nasturtiums, can explain why the fox trotted through my yard in the middle of yesterday, or why the pie guy in the next stall never seems to see me, even when I buy his apples or admire his gooseberry pies. Cheese shop, wine shop, backpack I stuff my groceries in before crossing Gratiot and making my way home. Through the park to my love or wood, except now I've moved far away and the market was locked down, while across the planet, Venice has canceled its yearly wedding with the sea. No rings to toss to the waves now, so why do I hear your voice in my dreams? And why did you call me in the middle of the night, months after you had died? Dead, he is dead, I told the 2 a.m. voice on the line. Even though I had just seen you sitting at my table, watching me whisk a sauce for our scallops, pen in your pocket protector, your shirt sleeves roll loosely above your finely boned wrists. Thanks, folks. Thanks, everybody. Thanks to April and Mary and Karen for helping make this happen. I'm so grateful to be here with John. And I was so grateful to be one of John's poets in his Afro-Dixie remixes in City Lights Books in San Francisco a couple of years ago. So it's really been a real honor for me to take this time time to share with you and to do this in the name of Horace Mann. What a great leader. No nonsense, man, you know? So thank you again, folks. And
That's
then
right.
Pete was going to help sort of guide the stack now. We've got questions and comments.
Yeah, there's some questions already dropped into the chat, Terry. The first is from Ruth Nathan, and she was saying, can you tell us a bit about your relationship? Oh no, sorry, there's one even before that. Can you talk about your relationship with the DIA, the Detroit Institute of the Arts?
Okay, yeah, actually that was really rich. I even before Inside Out, my classes were part of the Detroit Institute of Arts Writing About Art project. And that really kind of was my curriculum, starting every year with slides that we looked at, discussed, wrote about, and then got to go down to the museum. And the museum put out a publication of the kids' works, and it was just absolutely splendid. And then over time, they asked me if I would do workshops at the museum. So I did that for a while. And in fact, I also, I got my doctorate at Oakland University around then, and I was teaching classes for master's degree teachers. And they let me hold the classes on site at the DIA. So those are like my personal interactions with the DIA, but we've also had so much going on with Inside Out. We've had Inside Out students performing there, and we've been able to hold writers trainings there in the galleries. So yeah, glad you brought that up, because that's sort of a side passion of mine, is writing about art.
Thanks, Terry. It looks like Ruth has a follow-up question about your relationship with the poet Marie, and I don't know how to pronounce this correctly, Ponsot, P-O-N-S-O-T.
Yeah.
Ponsot, yeah.
Well, I was just really fortunate to take a workshop with her, I think it was 2006, at the Atlantic Center for the Arts. And she was just, I know Ruth has worked with her in terms of writing about art and writing about writing. Marie is an incredible, was a master of pedagogy of creative writing. So I didn't have an ongoing relationship with her, but a wonderful workshop. And we communicated a bit over time too. She was brilliant. Mm-hmm. We had one long walk along the Atlantic shore with Kelly Groom, who lives down there.
I don't see any other questions in the chat, but if anyone else wants to come off mute, feel free to ask away. This is your chance to pick Terry's brain a little bit about everything that she's done with her life through poetry. You know, it all starts with a poem, and Terry is a master teacher, and I'm really pleased. I didn't know that you were going to share poems today, but I really wanted to bring the conversation to your work as a poet. You know, you're so often celebrated for the work that you've done in the classroom and the founding of Inside Out. But I think the real story that too often goes untold is the body of work that you've generated in the past 25 years, which is really remarkable. I mean, you really, I think, who was it, Fitzgerald or someone talks about there's no second acts, right? And I think Terry's life proves otherwise, especially as a poet.
Thank you.
I have a question.
Yeah.
It looks like Helen has a question for you, and Helen goes way, way, way back.
Way back, yeah, Sterling. Yeah.
Terry, you left Detroit. Where you're located now, has that inspired any poetry?
Well, I still have a little apartment here. I'm actually in Lafayette Park right now at my friend Jane's house, but I have a little 1-bedroom in the pavilion. But I moved out to Connecticut to be near my my son and grandchildren, and my son teaches at Yale.
Oh,
And so it was a good time in a way for me. I mean, I had 20 years with Inside Out, and he was going through a divorce. So the grandchildren kind of needed me. And so, you know, I moved out there in 2016, but I kept my toehold here in the city. Lovely to see you, Helen. Thank you. Mhm.
The only other thing I was going to mention, Terry, is just that, I mean, to me, you're getting back to that epiphany that you had in the classroom as a writer at, let's just say it at age 50. Just, it speaks to that notion, which I think is probably very Antiochian, and I don't know that for sure because I don't have an affiliation with the college, but the fact that we're never not students.
Yeah.
You know, and I think that you, again, like as someone who really have created a really remarkable body of works. I mean, I was just going through your books, you know, this morning, in fact, you know, so there's an abundance. I mean, she's written a lot of poems over the past 25 years. So I don't know if you want to speak to that idea of just being you know, a constant learner. And I think it speaks to the work that we're still trying to do at Inside Out, that Chante was speaking about with, you know, training our writers and supporting our writers and, you know, exposing them to trauma-informed practice and social emotional learning and things like that.
Yeah, yeah. Well, you know, I'm I'm always like wondering if I'll write another poem. Honestly, I mean, it kind of comes and goes, you know, but I do have some things I'm working on now. And I'm thinking maybe I could do a new and selected at a certain point. But it's kind of kept me alive. I mean, it's kept me, it nurtures your soul to have a creative space to go to. And I mean, I know how I so admire you and your daily writing practice and the walks by the river. And I want everybody to know about Pete Marcus's new book. I don't have a copy here, but When Our Fathers Return to Us as Birds, so rewarding. So I have a collection of poems about Neil. I'm also been trying to confront a little bit the really horrendous history in my own family of my grandfather's participation in the Springfield race riot of 1908, which I didn't find out about until I was an adult. But that was a shocking event. It was kind of like a mini Tulsa massacre. And I mean, just in the amount of death was less, but it was so shocking. It was in 1908 that the NAACP was founded in 1909 as a result of that. And I'm sort of, you know, so I'm kind of exploring how can I come to terms with that? You know, how can I have my own reckoning? Because I think reckonings are really important. So that's part of the picture. And also, I'm really excited actually right now because that Emily Dickinson year I took has spun off into a lot of things. And the Book Beat actually did a little page about my Dickinson. They asked me to write about my own Dickinson experiences because I'd written poems about her. I wrote some encyclopedia entries about Dickinson. And I've been invited to be, and we did the big read. And that was kind of an amazing thing where we had the entire year devoted to celebrating Emily Dickinson through the federal program. And we had readings and lectures and lots of stuff in classrooms. So now Apple TV has this terrific, wacky, crazy series called Dickinson. And I've been invited to be sort of in the wings kind of consultant on it. And particularly they have a podcast that Jericho Brown and some other, Breezy, another performance poet, will be doing a talk back to season 3 of Dickinson. And it's really funny and it's very hip and contemporary. So it's nice to keep, since I moved to the East, I can get up to Amherst. You don't say the H, Amherst, pretty regularly. So that's been nice.
Ruth Nathan, Terry just posed another question in the chat asking, wasn't your dissertation about Emily Dickinson?
No, it wasn't. No. I did the Emily study at the same time as I did my dissertation. But my dissertation was actually a study of student poets. And I took 3 high school student poets and I had them write poems and take them through their various drafts and then talk to me about them and the processes they went through and that sort of thing. And actually one of those young women is now on the editor, writes for the New York Times, Farrah Stockman. So just seeing her name out there. So.
All right. Well, that's great. So I think that's about our time. If we have any final questions, Susan, did you want to say something? Oh, you don't have we can't hear you. You're not muted.
Huh. Susan, where are you?
Uh-oh, we still can't hear you, Susan. Let's see.
Well,
I
I
wonder
definitely want
service where she was on the phone.
She is on the phone. We can still see her, but for some reason her microphone's not working on the phone right now.
Well, I think I need to thank Susan for working with me on this. I also need to thank Steve Lippman from the Alumni Board. I don't think I mentioned him at the beginning, but he was responsible for this nomination. So thank you, Steve. I was really, really, really appreciated. And it kind of harkens back to when I was on the Alumni Board and how much I appreciated being on the nominating committee and learning about Antiochians and picking names for awards. And pretty cool.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Thank you indeed, Steve, for nominating Terry. And thank you, Terry.